Hello everyone. So before we get started, I would like to give a small example here to illustrate what we'll be discussing through this video. So imagine I have a right circular cylinder which I placed in a uniform flow. Let me try to sketch the flow field. It's a very common and popular diagram. Okay, this is how it looks like more or less. And these are the streamlines which we have here. These are the two stagnation points which we have here. So you can readily see that the flow field is very symmetric, and hence the pressure distributions on either side of the cylinder, that is on the top of the cylinder and on the bottom of the cylinder, would be symmetric, and the net pressure difference would be zero, and you can say that the lift generated by this flow is zero, but the drag is non-zero. You have to keep that in mind. And suppose, imagine now I add some rotation to the cylinder. I start rotating the cylinder in some like anti-clockwise direction with an angular velocity omega v. Then what happens is we start rotating the cylinder. The flow field starts to adjust itself like this. The stagnation points, instead of being on the diametrically opposite points, they get shifted towards uh, these points, and my flow field will look like this. Right? Something like this. And here you can observe that the flow field is non-symmetric. It is not symmetric about any diameter, this diameter, and the pressure distributions on the top and bottom are not the same. They are different, and hence we'll have a net pressure difference, which will generate a non-zero lift. So this is a lifting flow over a cylinder, and the drag is also non-zero. And that's not the end of the story. We'll see how this happens, and also what we'll do is, through a transformation called Zubkowski transformation. This is a mathematical transformation, type of conformal transformation. We can translate the properties of the lifting flow over a cylinder to that of an airfoil that we all know. We all know that it has much less drag compared to the cylinder, but with the help of this transformation, we can get the same lift and other same circulation vortex properties by significantly reducing the drag. So this is what we'll go through in this video. Let us quickly look at what are the topics that we'll be discussing. So the topics to be discussed are, we'll quickly go through some basics which include stream functions, velocity, potentials. Then after that we'll look at elementary flows, um, which includes uniform flow, source or sink flow, and combination of uniform and source or sink flow. And we look at what is a doublet flow, and with the help of doublet flows and source sink flows, we'll look at how to generate a non-lifting flow over a cylinder mathematically. And then we look at what is a vortex flow, and with the help of vortex flow and non-lifting flow over a cylinder, we'll try to generate the lifting flow over a cylinder. And after that, we'll try to derive the Kutta-Joukowski theorem, which relates the lift to the circulation around the cylinder. And after that, we'll fix the circulation to a particular value which is given, which should be satisfied by satisfy the Kutta condition. And after that, finally, we'll look at how Joukowski transformation can be performed, so that we can translate the properties of the lifting flow over a cylinder to that of an airfoil. So now let's start with the basics. So the first thing that we'll be looking at is the stream function. So before we get to that, we'll start with a simple figure. So imagine I have an airfoil here like this, and if I try to sketch the flow around it, zero angle of attack will be, so look something like this. So if I try to take a small point here, and if I this will be the direction of his velocity vector, and if I take the small element, the length element here, its direction will also be the same, ds vector, and it is the property of a streamline that the particle on a streamline will have its velocity tangential to the path of the streamline, and the same will be for the ds vector also. So we can say that the condition for a particle to follow or lie on a streamline would be ds cross v equals 0, because they lie on the same plane and their cross product would be 0. And suppose I take my ds vector to be uh, dx I cap plus dy j cap plus dz k cap, and I take my v vector to be ui cap plus vj cap plus wk cap. So if I take a cross product here, I'll get something like this. So this is determinant of um, I j k plus dx dy dz is u v w. When I equate this to 0, I get three equations. So they will be w dy minus v dz equals 0, w dx minus u dz equals 0, and v dx minus u dy equals 0. We have three equations which represent the equation of streamlines. When you integrate them, you will get a closed form solution of the equation for streamlines. So this represents equation of streamlines in 3D. So just to make things more simpler, let's consider a 2D case. If we consider 2D case, my equation of streamline would be just v dx minus u dy equals 0. And if I write it in a better form, it will be dy by dx equals v by u. You can readily see that depending on the nature of v and u, we can either obtain a closed form solution by integrating y with respect to x, and so on. So just to give a small graphical view, consider this to be the x-axis, y-axis, and suppose I have a streamline that goes like this, and I consider a particle here, small element, so it has a velocity v here like this. This is how it goes. If I take the components, it will be uh, this will be the vertical component small v, and this will be the horizontal component u. And we also know that dy by dx is the slope of the tangent at that point, so we can say that the slope is equal to the net the y component by the x component. This is how you can graphically interpret it. And yeah, so now that now that we have got the stream the equation for the streamline, that is dy by dx is v by u, we can write this in a better form. For example, I can integrate it and I can write y equals f of x, or I can also write it as a function of f of x comma y, where these f's are different, is a constant. I try to bring all the variables to one side, and I can say f of x comma y is a constant, and this f is what I call my psi y. This is the stream function. This is what we call the stream function, and x comma y equals a constant c. So this stream function will describe the function or the equation of a streamline. Just to give you a more intuitive understanding, let me draw a diagram. For example, I have a streamline that's going like, I have set of streamlines going like this. You can see that all these streamlines look same, except that they are separated by some small vertical distance, right? So since they all look same, they have the same nature, all these have the same stream functions. The phi of x comma y would be the same for all these streamlines. and the only thing is this constant is what is varying. So this will be phi of x comma y equals c1, this will be phi of x comma y equals c2, and so on. So I can say that the distance between these two streamlines would be c1 minus c2, which is the same as phi 1 of x comma y minus phi 2 of x comma y. This is just to give you an intuitive picture of how to take on which streamlines. Delta psi, I did that way also. And you can also write this in polar coordinates in case you require that. Yeah, so now that we have understood what is a streamline, we can move on to the next topic, which will be um, velocity potentials. We'll talk about what is a velocity potential. Now that we have talked about streamlines, let's talk about what is a velocity potential. So assume that we are assuming it is an irrotational flow here, just for sake of simplicity, and we are dealing with low speed aerodynamics, so we can assume that maybe. And we know the condition for an irrotational flow is that the curl of the velocity vector must be 0. The curl of the velocity vector is also given as the vorticity, which is represented by epsilon zeta. So since I can also write, since the curl of a gradient of something is also 0, because we know curl of grad is 0, and comparing these two equations, I can write that v is gradient of some scalar by phi is some scalar function. I can write that v is the gradient of a scalar function phi, and this phi is what we call as the velocity potential. This is what we call as the velocity potential primarily. And for example, just to expand things, I assume y to be ui cap plus vj cap, as we always do, as wk cap. I can write my del phi to be dou phi by dou x I cap plus dou phi by dou y j cap plus dou phi by dou z k cap, right? So where these are the different components of scalar function, and by comparing these two, like, we can write u equals, change the color, yeah, so u equals dou phi by dou x, v equals dou phi by dou y, and we have w equals dou phi by dou z. I can also write a similar expression in polar coordinates. I'm not deriving it here, but just for the sake of record, I can write my radial velocity to be dou phi by dou r, and my v theta tangential velocity to be 1 by r dou phi by dou theta, and my vz, the perpendicular to plane velocity, to be d dou phi by dou z. That remains the same in most cases. And this is in cylindrical coordinates. Cylindrical. If I try to write it in spherical, this is what I would get probably. I'll get Vr is dou phi by dou r. I'll get v theta to be 1 by r. These two remain the same. It is only the third part that is going to change, v theta, and vz equal v phi. We have three angles in a spherical coordinate system: r sine theta into dou phi by so capital phi. Capital phi is that angle that we have. So we have r comma theta comma phi. Yeah, and cylindrical coordinate system would be r comma phi comma z. This is just x comma y comma z. Yeah, and that's all about velocity potential. So now we can move on to elementary flows. Let's look at some different kinds of elementary flows. And just to give you an introduction, an elementary flow is a kind of flow which has a relatively simpler mathematical expression, and we can add up elementary flows or we can subtract elementary flows. We can do these kinds of operations to obtain more complex flows. So that is why that is the sole purpose of learning elementary flows. For example, I take a uniform flow. So we all know what is a uniform flow. Draw a quick picture here. So it is set of parallel lines. The depiction of a uniform flow in free stream, right? So I can let me assume the velocity to be v infinity here, that is the u velocity, and there is no velocity in the vertical direction. This is my x and this is my y, just for clarity. So I can write that so from my velocity potential equation I can write dou phi by dou x equals u, which I've assumed to be v infinity, and I can write dou phi by dou y, which is my v, which is 0 in this case. So by integrating the first equation, I get phi equals ux plus some function of y, or I can also write it's v infinity x plus some function of y. That is the function of integration or constant of integration. And also if I integrate the second equation, that is d phi by dy with respect to v, with respect to y, I'll get phi equals a constant, because the right hand side is 0, constant plus f of x, that's the function of integration. This is rules of partial integration, not the same f of x, it will be, let's assume it's g of x. And you can say that since phi is only a function of x, and but we have the same phi as as v infinity x plus f of y, we can say that f of y is a constant, because phi should be only a function of x. So from these two equations I can write that phi is, sorry for the glitch, phi is v infinity x plus some constant. So this is the velocity potential for a uniform flow that we have derived. So we can see this, we can observe this readily in the picture also. Imagine, for example, I draw a vertical cross section line like this. You can readily see that at any point on this line the phi will be a constant, because my x is a constant. This is at a fixed x is equal to x naught, suppose at a fixed x v infinity is a constant, phi will be a constant at a fixed x. So we can see that this is the um, pictorial representation of the phi here. And we also know what is a stream function. Stream function will be constant along every streamline. It will be constant in every streamline individually, and they'll differ just by a constant. That is what we have derived earlier. Alright, so the similar thing that we did for velocity potential we'll be doing for a stream function also. We know that we have equations. Let me just change the color. Yeah, so we have dou psi by dou y equals u, and which is v infinity, where our psi here is the stream function, and we have dou psi by dou x equals minus v, which is 0. This is from our equation of streamline that we have derived earlier, if you remember rightly. And if I similarly do the same kind of integration here, I will get psi equals v infinity into y plus some constant, which I am assuming to be 0 in this case. Constant are just to change the streamline, they are not something very significant. And this is all that we have to discuss for a uniform flow. Alright, okay. So before we get into the next kind of flow, we'll quickly calculate what is the kind of circulation that we'll be observing in a uniform flow. So I'm trying to sketch the uniform flow again here, streamlines. So assume these are my streamlines for the uniform flow. Now we all know that circulation is negative of the closed line integral v dot ds, where v is my velocity vector and ds is my um, length vector along the curve. So the closed curve that I will be assuming for this field is, let me assume something like this. This is my closed curve C. Okay, just along the closed curve C that I will be assuming, and I can write this as um, because my velocity I have assumed it to be v infinity along this direction. There is no velocity in this direction. The v is 0 on the vertical direction, and I can assume I'll assume this length to be L and this length to be h. I can write this as negative of v infinity times L plus 0 times h minus v infinity uh, times L plus 0 times h. It is minus 0 times h. Minus 0 times h. So I can readily see that my circulation turns out to be 0 here. Yeah, this is the case for a uniform flow. We get the circulation to be 0. So now that we have got the velocity potential, we have got the stream function, and we have calculated what is the kind of circulation, we have pretty much good idea about how this flow is behaving in a mathematical sense. So next we'll look at something called, our next elementary flow is source flow or sink flow, that is complements of each other. So for a source flow, it is just very easy to imagine it. Consider I have a positive point charge, like we have studied in our high schools. So we have outward going electric field that point charge generates. So similarly, the source flow generates outward flows. That's all. It has only radial flow direction. There is nothing. It does not have any streamline along the tangential direction. So I can readily say that, see, this is my radial direction VR, and this is my tangential. Sorry, this is my tangential direction V theta. These two are supposed to be perpendicular. So I can say that VR is non-zero, V theta is 0, because I don't have any streamlines along that direction. So I can give an empirical equation. I can write VR is constant by R, because the magnitude decreases as I go far away from this flow, from the flow source. And I can write V theta to be 0 here. Similarly, like if you take a sink flow, it is just a complement. Like you have um, inward pointing flows. It is similar to negatively charged particle charged particle placed in a field, and this is the kind of field that it will generate. This is a similar analogy to the sink that we have in our kitchens. This can be considered to be a tap. This can be considered to the sink hole. The sink hole takes all the flows in this, and the tap gives out all the flow. So that's the same. That's why the same name has also been given. Alright. So we'll try to here we have adopted cylindrical coordinates, because we can observe we have good radial symmetry in the flow fields. So using cylindrical coordinates would be beneficial for us to avoid a lot of rigor. So we'll now try to derive the velocity, potential, stream functions, and the circulation like we did for the uniform flow quickly. So let me try to draw a cylindrical domain along which we'll be operating. So consider this to be my x-axis, y-axis, d-axis, and I have my cylinder here, extends along the x-axis, z-axis, sorry, extends along the z-axis, and it gets over here. I assume it to be of length L, finite length, and we know that so this is the center. Um, this is the radius vector. If we take some point here, this is the theta that we'll be measuring in a cylindrical coordinate system. Now I need to find what is the mass flow rate m dot out of the cylinder, that comes out of the cylinder. Like an analogy would be considering a current carrying wire and taking a cylindrical domain over its cylindrical space, along with we'll be calculating the electric field generated by the current carrying wire. So similarly we'll be finding out what is the mass flow rate out of the cylinder. So for that, similarly we have to do integration. So I'll consider small element, ds element. This is my ds element. So I'll find out what is the mass flow rate out of this ds element, and I'll integrate it over the entire scenario. Theta equals 0 to 2 pi, and then I'll get the entire mass flow rate. So this is my d theta, and this is my r. You all know that. So if I try to write the mass flow rate equation, I can write it to be integral 0 to 2 pi, because we have theta is a variable here. Rho, that is the density, vr is the radial velocity, and we have r d theta, which is the length of this ds element, and we have l, that is the length. Now that we have got the volume now, and this is what we have to integrate. So if I take off the constants, we have here r, l, and integral 0 to 2 pi, is just d theta. So this implies we get 2 pi rho v r l. Yeah, I think we have another r. So this is the mass flow rate. So from here we'll be defining another quantity called volume flow rate. Volume flow rate, which is denoted by v dot. This is not the velocity v, this is the volume v. So this is volume per unit time. So I can write this to be the mass flow rate by volume, because mass flow rate is mass by time, and volume is mass by volume. So this mass flow rate by density will give me volume flow rate. Density is mass by volume. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So from the previous equation, we can get this to be 2 pi r L times VR. So this is my volume flow rate. And since the arbitrary quantity in our assumption is the length, so I need to make this quantity independent of length. So I assume another quantity which is called volume flow rate per unit length. It is just volume flow rate per unit length, so which is given by V dot by L, and we get that to be 2 pi r times VR, and this we call as gamma. This is the capital gamma. Oh, sorry, this is the capital lambda. I'm sorry, this is the capital lambda. We call this as lambda. So from here we can get VR to be lambda by 2 pi r, and from our previous empirical equation we can find out c to be lambda by 2 pi, that is a constant. Now that we have got yeah, now that we have got the velocities, like we have got the value of vr and we have got the value of v theta, which is 0. We have got that empirically. We can now go on to find the velocity potential and the streamlines. So you know that for a cylindrical coordinate system we have got the equation for velocity potentials to be, let me quickly write that. So it is dou phi by dou r equals vr, which is lambda by 2 pi r, and if I integrate this I get phi equals lambda by 2 pi. I'm integrating with respect to r, so I get a logarithm of r, because integral of 1 by r is logarithm of r, and I get an f of theta, which is the function of integration, this is partial integration. And for similarly for the theta coordinate, I have 1 by r rho phi by dou theta, which is my v theta, which is 0, which implies if I integrate this I get phi equals some constant plus function of r. So if I compare plus, so if I compare these two equations, I get my phi to be um, lambda by 2 pi times logarithm of r to the base e. So this is my velocity potential for a source flow or a sink flow. Sink flow is just the negative of this thing. And similarly, now we will try to quickly derive the stream function. So we have it as 1 by r rho psi by dou theta. This is the complementary of the velocity potential. So it is vr, it is lambda by 2 pi r, and if I try to integrate this with respect to theta, I get lambda by 2 pi r times theta plus some function of r. And similarly we have r. minus dou psi by dou r equals v theta, which is 0. And if I try to integrate this, I get psi to be some constant plus a function of theta, integrating with respect to r. So from these two equations, I can say my stream function psi is nothing but just lambda by 2 pi into theta. I'm sorry, there is a 1 by r here. I think I missed it. We will not have a r here because the 1 by r on the LHS and RHS will get cancelled. It is just lambda by 2 pi. And this is the stream function for a source flow or a sink flow. And now that we have got the stream function and velocity potentials, we need to find out what is the kind of circulation similar to what we did for the uniform flow. The circulation is given by, I'll take the surface integral here, which we got using some Green's theorem. It is the curl of velocity, which is the vorticity times ds. So we know that the curl of velocity is 0 because this is an irrotational field that we are considering, and we get circulation to be 0 in a source flow or a sink flow. Yeah. All right. So now that we have analyzed the source or sink flow and the uniform flow, we have calculated their velocity potentials, we have calculated their stream functions and their circulations. We can now start try doing some mix matching. Let's try combining a uniform flow, a different color, which looks like this. I try to combine this with a source flow, which generates streamlines like this. It is not. It is more or less an intuitive result that we will be expecting. We know this is the uniform stream, and this is the source flow. The result is fairly intuitive. We can see the combined profile looks something like this. Looks like this. This is the stagnation point. Flow goes like this. You can see that the uniform flow is like a gust of wind that is trying to push over all the left side flowing source flows towards the right, and that is what we can see is appearing as this figure here, this flow. And we can see this point, we call it as B, I'll call this as D, just following the convention that by the book so that it will be easy when we refer it. Alright, so we have said that the major purpose of finding streamlines, velocity potentials for these elementary flows is that we can just add them to try to make complex flows like this. This is not a straightforward flow for which we can calculate the velocities, velocity potentials or stream functions, but we know how this flow is formed. So we know that the stream function for a uniform flow is psi. Let me take a different color. Is psi, which we have derived earlier, is psi equals b infinity r times sine theta. We do not derive this exactly, we derived it in the Cartesian form. This is in the spherical coordinates, and we have psi equals, cylindrical coordinates. So we have psi equals lambda by 2 pi times theta. We derive this in the cylindrical coordinates. You will get the same thing as for uniform stream also. It is provable. And if I want to find the stream function of this final resulting profile, all I need to do is just add this. It is that simple, and that is the main reason that we need to look at elementary flows, because we can generate a whole lot of complex flow fields using these kinds of elementary flows. So it is just a superposition. So this is the final flow fill streamline for stream function for this complex flow fill. Now from this I can get my Vr V theta, because I know we know that Vr is nothing but 1 by r dou psi by dou theta partial derivative, and I can just differentiate this. I'll get V infinity cos theta plus lambda by 2 pi r, and similarly I can also get my V theta, which we know it is minus dou psi by dou r, and if I just take a derivative with respect to r, it is V infinity sin theta. That's all. And it's negative, I'm sorry. And now we can easily get the radial velocity at any theta given in this figure, and we can also get the tangential velocity. So we'll look at one more thing. I'll get the figure here once again. So we can see that keep the figure here. We can see that there is this point B. This point B here is the stagnation point. That is the point where the entire velocity becomes zero, because the uniform flow is trying to push everything towards the right, and the source flow, the left part of the source flow, is trying to push everything towards the left. And the both the horizontal flows, they, because we are assuming them to be somewhat similar in strength, there will be a stagnation point at exactly the horizontal point where the velocity of the flow would be zero. And to find out the stagnation point is relatively very simple. I just put Vr equals 0 and V theta equals 0, because that is what it means. So if I do that, it is V infinity cos theta plus lambda by 2 pi r equals 0, and it is V infinity sin theta equals 0. These were my Vr and V theta. Yeah, sorry, there are some glitches. 0 0. So if I solve these two, I get my r r to be lambda by 2 pi V infinity, and I get my theta to be pi, because you can see this is nothing but 180 degrees, which so this is the location, r comma theta location of this point B. And I can see that if I substitute this r comma theta into my streamline equation, psi of r comma theta, if I substitute this, I'll get my streamline at r comma theta to be just lambda by 2, which is a constant. And we can find out the streamline here, and that is nothing but it is this streamline, this yellow streamline. This is the streamline that's passing through the stagnation point B, and this streamline is described by psi equals lambda by 2. Yeah, so yeah, let me just label this once. So I'll call this A, I'll call this B. I'll try to redraw that streamline alone. So that would look like something like this. This is my sorry, this is my I have to call this something because I already have a here. I'll call this C. So C, and this is my A, this is my B, and this is my C. So it is like it is extending to infinity like this. So for example, this is the kind of streamline that we get when we try to superimpose a source flow along with a uniform flow. So what if I want to get a flow such that this semi-infinite kind of elliptical structure needs to be closed? I want an ellipse like this. What we can do to get this kind of structure, trying to make it symmetrical. Okay, so if I need to get something of like something of this side, and the streamline should go something like this. It is a source flow that is making this thing go to infinity. It is making things diverging. But what if I just place a sink flow? at some small at some appropriate distance from the source flow, it starts absorbing this infinite thing, and that will give us this kind of a flow. Let's quickly go discuss that. I'll not go into the details because it's out of the scope here. So we have a source flow. So I have a uniform flow. We're drawing the same diagram. Plus I take a source flow. Plus I take a sink flow. So if I do this, I'll get a flow that looks like this. It is a closed closed elliptical region in the middle, and the flow goes. This is not a rigid body, keep that in mind. This is not any rigid body which we are keeping in a uniform flow. This is the flow itself caused due to the presence of the source and sink flow nearby. So there are some calculations which we can do to find out the similar things. We can find out the stream functions, velocity potentials, VR, V theta. So it is just the same thing. Psi equals V infinity R sine theta. We have psi equals lambda by 2 pi times theta 1, and psi equals minus lambda by 2. This is not delta. This is lambda by 2 pi theta 2, because this is the same like I said earlier, it is just the negative of the source flow. So my net psi would for this complex flow field is nothing but V infinity R sine theta plus lambda by 2 pi times theta 1 minus theta 2, which I can describe as delta theta also. So I don't want to go any more into this. I want to show that this can also be done. So we'll now move on to the next elementary flow. This is called the doublet flow. Like the name suggests, it looks like a doublet. Let me quickly draw it. So you have a small circle, bigger circle, more bigger circle. Okay, these are not exactly. Consider these to be circles. Yeah. Sorry for bad drawing. So this is a doublet flow, and we'll have streamlines that go like this. Okay, I have not marked the directions. This is how it will go. I'll tell you in coming time why, what is the use of this kind of a flow and where do we see this in nature. We'll get to that in some time. Okay, so we'll quickly derive the properties for a doublet flow. So we know that the major idea of getting a doublet flow is just that um, you have a source here, you have a sink nearby. So what happens is similar to the previous case that we discussed. Like you are making the ellipse more smaller and smaller. You are instead of having a uniform flow, you are just having a source flow and a sink flow. It is similar to a positive charge and a negative charge that is kept nearby, and you'll get fields like this. So it is similar to that. That is what we are trying to do, and we are limiting this distance between them to 10 to 0, and then we'll get a doublet kind of flow. That is what we are trying to do. So for example, I have a random arbitrary point P on which over which I'm trying to calculate my flow properties. So this is my source, suppose source, and this is my sink, and I assume this angle to be theta 2. It is the angle of the sink, and this is the angle of the source to be theta 1, and I can say this is the delta theta by property of triangles. We have theta 2 equals theta 1 plus delta theta. The external angle is the sum of opposite internal angles, so I can say this. And now if I try to calculate the stream function, we know we have to just add the stream functions. So it is psi equals lambda by 2 pi times theta 1 minus theta 2, and which is lambda by 2 pi minus delta theta, because delta theta is theta 2 minus theta 1. So it is minus lambda by 2 pi times delta theta. And if I want to make this a doublet flow, I need to bring these two closer. That means I need to calculate psi on the limit L tends to 0 minus lambda by 2 pi times delta theta. So this is what will be my psi for a doublet flow exactly. And we have something called kappa, which is defined as the doublet strength of the doublet flow. Doublet strength, you can call it either way, um, which is given as L times lambda, which needs to be a constant. And one more thing, we consider the source and sink of to be the same strength. Lambda is what we call the strength of a source flow or a sink flow. We have assumed it to be of same strength so that we have symmetrical doublet. If we just quickly try to do some, if I try to make it small, I'll make a small scale assumption. So right, this is my lambda, this is my negative lambda. I have that same point over here, the P point. This is my perpendicular that I draw, and suppose I consider this angle to be theta, and considering both the angles to be same, this will also be theta. That is a small angle assumption, and this delta theta would turn out to be just d theta. And I give some namings here. So I call this distance from the source to the point P to be r, and from point P to the sink to be b. This length, like we know it is L, that is what we are going to send to 0, and this perpendicular length we'll call it A. Just by simple trigonometry, I have A equals L sin theta, B equals R minus L cos theta from the triangles because it's a right angle triangle, and I have d theta equals A by B. Is tan d theta is assumed as this d theta, small angle approximation, and which is nothing but L sin theta by R minus L cos theta. You know this. And my psi is nothing but limit L tends to 0 minus lambda by 2 pi times delta theta. Delta theta here becomes d theta, right? So we carry on this to the next page. uh, I have my psi to be limit L tends to 0 minus lambda by 2 pi times L sin theta by R minus L cos theta, and I have my kappa to be lambda times L, so I can write this as limit L tends to 0 minus kappa by 2 pi times sin theta by R minus L cos theta. And if I tend L to 0 here, I'll get my psi to be negative kappa by 2 pi times sin theta by R. This is direct limit. So this is my stream function for a doublet flow. And similarly now, in a similar fashion, we can derive the velocity potential also for a doublet flow, which will get to be it just looks like a complement. It is just kappa by 2 pi cos theta by R. This look like, yeah. Before we get into our next topic, which is this non-lifting flow over a cylinder, I'll quickly give you a thing here. So the thing is, this is a doublet flow that we had that we were analyzing so far, and there is one crux here. So suppose I have my psi to be minus kappa by 2 pi into sin theta by R. So suppose to get a streamline, the stream function is constant, is what gives a streamline equation. So I make this a constant, which I assume to be C. So now this gives the equation of a streamline, and I can get my R to be minus kappa by 2 pi C sin theta. So this is the equation of a streamline. Suppose I assume my kappa by 2 pi c to be some constant d, then I can get my r to be d sine theta. And just showing it pictorially, we can say that I take this point, suppose at some distance r, and this is this d. This is what d represents when you represent a doublet flow using streamlines. It is this kappa by 2 by c. That's all. So now that we have looked at what is a doublet flow, and we have got these stream functions and velocity potentials for a doublet flow, let's try another kind of mixed matching which involves a doublet flow. So imagine I have a uniform flow here which has a stream function psi equals v infinity r sine theta, and I have a doublet assume this is symmetrical. I'm not sure if I do not draw it exactly, and I'm adding this with a uniform flow. The doublet is of strength kappa, and we know that the stream function for a doublet flow is minus kappa by 2 pi times sine theta by r, and so when I add this, I happen to get something that is very interesting, and that is observed in normal experiments also. So what happens is this doublet stays here like this, and this is how the doublet flows, the directions. And what happens is the flow starts flowing around the doublet like this. And if we try to observe this carefully, it more or less resembles as if we keep uh, a rigid cylinder. Okay, this is not a cylinder exactly, rigid cylinder inside. So this is how the doublet flow with the uniform flow behaves actually. It almost resembles the flow over a cylinder, like non-lifting flow, because we can see the flow is symmetrical. This is similar to what we saw in the introduction. We can say the stream function is just the sum of these two stream functions. It's v infinity r sine theta minus kappa by 2 pi sine theta by r. So this is a stream function for the non-lifting flow over a cylinder. And let me just make some quick labeling here. Let me call the radius of the cylinder that we have assumed to be r, and I I take a vector which goes to the streamline and which makes an angle theta with the x-axis. We have assumed this to be x and y directions. That's a normal convention, and that is the theta that appears in the stream function equations. So yeah, I'll just rewrite. So this is the streamline stream function. Is infinity r sine theta minus kappa over 2 pi times sine theta over r. So this is our stream function for the non-lifting flow cylinder. So try to make some manipulations here. So I take b infinity r sine theta common, and I get 1 minus kappa over 2 pi v infinity r square, because that r comes to the denominator and becomes r square. Outside I define I define this r square to be kappa by 2 pi v infinity. We'll later see that this r square is nothing but the radius of the cylinder, which we keep inside. So it is just that if you have a radius of cylinder which satisfies this relation, which has the value of this relation, the where kappa is the strength of the doublet, and v infinity is the free stream velocity of the uniform flow, then we can say that it exactly resembles the same flow field that will be produced if we have a cylinder of radius r placed in a uniform flow. So that is what we are looking at. So we can write after substituting r square for that, we can write our stream function to be V infinity r sin theta is nothing but the stream function of the uniform flow times 1 minus r square by r square. This looks like a more formidable expression. Yeah, so this is our stream function for the non-lifting flow over a cylinder, which we can also say as the flow that we get when we add a doublet to a uniform flow. And so next we'll try to, like, once we have got the stream functions like we did for the earlier flow conditions, we'll try to derive the radial velocity and tangential velocity. We operate in cylindrical coordinates, so we have Vr, we know it is uh, 1 by r dou phi, sorry, it is dou psi by dou theta, which is 1 by r times V infinity r cos theta times 1 minus r square by r square. This is nothing but V infinity cos theta times 1 minus r square by r square. So this is our Vr, and similarly if I try to calculate V theta, which we know is given by minus dou psi by dou r, and if I differentiate it, I'll get it to be minus V infinity sin theta times 1 plus r square by r square. This is my tangential velocity. So similarly, since we have got Vr and V theta, we'll try to calculate the stagnation points. We can observe from the figure that we need to get two stagnation points, like from the flow field. Let's see if that comes out mathematically also. So to find the stagnation points, we equate Vr to be 0 and V theta also to be 0. So which implies on solving these two, solving Vr equals 0 and V theta equals 0, we actually get two solutions for this, in which one solution is r comma theta equals r comma 0 and r comma theta equals, the other solution is r comma phi. We can see that clearly from the figure, right? Let me bring this figure to the next page also. We can clearly see that when theta equals 0, we have a stagnation point here, and when theta equals pi, we have another stagnation point here, and that is why it says mathematically also. So, and when we try to substitute these 2 points in our stream function equation, we get psi to be 0. So we can say that the streamline, that is this circle or the cylinder, in case of the cylinder, that is the streamline which passes through both the stagnation points and has the equation psi equals 0. That is the stream function. And another important result that we just got earlier was r square equals kappa by 2 pi v infinity. So we have r equals square root of kappa by 2 pi v infinity. So this is how we can get the mathematical representation of the non-lifting flow over a right circular cylinder. So that's all with the right circular cylinder and non-lifting flow. Okay. So the next elementary flow that we'll be looking at is called the vortex flow. This is the fourth elementary flow that we are looking at. So let me get a picture here. Yeah. So in this picture, you can see that this is how the vortex flow is represented. You have a point vortex at the center, which is O, which is generating these kinds of flow fields. We have concentric circles which are revolving around, and we can readily observe that we don't have any radial velocity. The Vr is 0, radial component of the velocity, and it is all V theta. It is a complete contrast to the source flow or the sink flow, where we had non-zero radial velocity and 0 tangential velocity. So we can assume in a similar fashion to what we assume for the source of sink flow, we can assume the tangential velocity to be c by r, where c is a constant. And now if I try to calculate the circulation, because circulation must be there to create this kind of a flow, that's an intuitive judgment. So if I try to calculate the circulation, which is given by the closed line integral of v ds, it is minus v theta times 2 pi r, because the curve that I've close contour that I've chosen is C, which is a circle at an arbitrary distance small r from the point vertex. And from here I can say my v theta. Okay. My v theta is nothing but minus gamma by 2 pi r, and from my empirical relation also I can say my c is minus gamma by 2 pi. So this is one important result that we have got. This two. Now let's see if this flow is um, it is actually said that the vortex flow is irrotational except at the origin. We'll try to see why this is the case. So when we suppose I consider my circulation, I'll write it in this form. It is 2 pi c from this relation we got, and using the other integral, surface integral, to calculate circulation, I can write it is the surface integral of curl of velocity along a surface ds. So which implies I can write 2 pi c is my surface integral, curl of velocity ds. So we can now see that um, this we can see that the circulation is constant along any curve that we take, along any contour that we take inside the vortex flow. For any r, the circulation will remain the constant, even if it is very close to the origin or if it is very far away from the origin. The circulation is always minus 2 pi c. And let me just write this again. Yeah. So circulation will also remain the same. So suppose I now make my contour, make my surface come very close to the origin. For example, when r is tending to 0, I can write my surface integral curl of velocity ds to be approximated to just the modulus of the curl times the small infinitesimal surface that I am considering. So from these two equations, I can say that my 2 pi c is nothing but the the magnitude of the curl of the velocity times the small element. So I can say that the magnitude of the curl is nothing but the magnitude of vorticity is 2 pi c by ds. So when we get too close to the origin, like when r tends to 0, we know that ds also tends to 0, that is the infinitesimal surface that we are considering. So as ds also tends to 0, at the origin we can say the vorticity tends to infinity. That means it is the origin is a singularity point. The flow is irrotational everywhere except at the origin where it is infinitely rotational. So that is how we can describe the vortex flow, singularity at the origin, or O, the vortex point. We can state it like this also. The infinite what point vortex generates vortex flow fields around itself, like in concentric circles which are irrotational. That is just another way of stating the same thing. Now that we have looked at, let's go back to our usual procedure of calculating our velocity potentials. So if I try to calculate my velocity potential, I know my d phi by dr is vr, which is 0, and my this implies phi is vr times r. Sorry, phi is some constant plus function of theta, and I have the other equation, which is 1 by r d phi, dou phi by dou theta, which is my v theta, which is non-zero, which is given by minus gamma by 2 pi r. Now if we try to integrate this, we'll be getting something like this, which implies we'll get phi equals minus gamma over 2 pi times theta plus f of r. So from these two equations we can write that my phi, that is the velocity potential for a vortex flow, is given by minus gamma by 2 pi times theta. And similarly we can find the stream function also. You know that stream function 1 by r dou psi. Okay, let me use a different color. It is 1 by r dou psi by dou theta equals vr, which is 0. And if I integrate this, um, I get my psi to be some constant plus some f of r. And similarly if I write the other equation, which is minus dou psi by dou r, which equals v theta, which is not a 0. We know what is v theta. It is minus gamma by 2 pi r. And if I integrate this, I'll get psi to be um, gamma by 2 pi times logarithm of r plus some function of theta. So from these two equations I can say that my psi, that is a stream function for a vortex flow, is given by gamma by 2 pi times ln of r. So these two are the important results that we have. So now we have discussed all the important elementary flows. Let us quickly tabulate it so that we have our flow, we have our velocity, we have a velocity potential, and we have our stream function. If I say it is the flow is uniform, velocity is u equals v infinity, and the other component is 0. So if I integrate this, I get v infinity times x, and this is the stream function is nothing but v infinity times y. And so next thing is the source flow. So we have Br equals lambda by 2 pi r, and we have our velocity potentials to be lambda by 2 pi times ln r, and we have a stream function to be lambda by 2 pi times theta, and we have our v theta to be next source is our vortex flow. For sink it is just the negative of the same row. You can write source negative sink. Yeah. And next is the vortex flow. So for vortex flow we have v theta which is given by minus gamma by 2 pi r, and my velocity potential is minus gamma by 2 pi times theta, and my stream function is gamma by 2 pi times ln r. This is the reverse of complementary of this source or sink flow. And last we have the doublet. The order is not chronological, but we have our vr to be minus kappa, which is the doublet strength, kappa by 2 pi times cos theta by r square, and we have our v theta to be minus kappa by over 2 pi times sin theta by r square, and we have our velocity potential to be kappa by 2 pi cos theta over r, and finally we have our stream function to be minus kappa over 2 pi times sin theta by r. So this is just a quick recap or tabulation of all the elementary flows that we have looked at and their corresponding properties. So next is something that very interesting that we'll be looking at. This is called the lifting flow over a cylinder. We are coming back to our introduction over a cylinder. So by now you would have got a very vague idea of how we are going to do this, because we have looked at vortex flow, we have looked at non-lifting flow over a cylinder. Lifting flow over a cylinder seems just ahead. So to get a lifting flow over a cylinder, we'll do the same thing. I have this is my non-lifting flow over a cylinder. Let me just try it quickly. This is my non-lifting flow over a cylinder. This is a cylinder. We have the two stagnation points, and yeah. And if I now combine this with a point vortex or a vortex flow, which has a circulation or strength of gamma, that is how we describe vortex flows. And assume this is V infinity is the free stream velocity and the radius of the cylinder is r, then I get what is called a lifting flow over a cylinder. What happens is the flow starts to look like this. The stagnation points which were earlier at these 2 points now have shifted themselves to these 2 points. So the flow looks like this. You can see the flow looks highly unsymmetrical. It is not unsymmetrical at all. So we start suspecting that this will have some unbalanced forces which leads to a lift, and that is what is happening. So now let's go over the same procedure that we did earlier. So we have derived the steam function for a non-lifting flow over a cylinder. We have it to be psi equals V infinity r sine theta times 1 minus r square by r square, and we know what is the steam function for a vortex flow, which is gamma over 2 pi times ln of r plus some constant. And since this is an arbitrary constant, in the text they have assumed it to be they have assumed the constant to be negative gamma over 2 pi times ln r. This is the capital R and it's the radius of the cylinder. Just to simplify the calculations and make things more understandable. So if we now we can directly write what is the steam function. We superimpose these two. We have V infinity r sine theta times 1 minus r square by r square plus gamma by 2 pi. You can write it is ln of r by r plus log a minus log b is log a by b. I can write it directly. So this is the steam function for what is called a lifting flow over a cylinder. Right. So let's see what is happening. We'll go through the same procedure and we'll try to draw some insights from whatever we get. So we'll try to get the VR, which turns out to be 1 minus r square by r square into b infinity cos theta, and our v theta comes out to be minus v infinity sin theta times 1 plus r square by r square minus gamma over 2 pi r. So this is what is our tangential velocity. You can clearly see that this is nothing that looks symmetrical or has some uniformity in it. The equation says itself. So and to locate the stagnation point, because we have observed here that the stagnation points got shifted. They are not on the diametrically opposite points still. They've got shifted to these 2 points. So let's try to calculate the stagnation points and see if that checks out. So to do that, we equate Vr to 0 and V theta to 0. When we do that, we get theta to be sine inverse of minus gamma over 4 pi V infinity. I am not going over the calculations, it's taking a lot of time. Yeah. So so we can see that from this equation, depending on the ratio of gamma over 4 pi V infinity r, we'll get different values of theta. So for example, initially we can take a few cases. So first case is I assume gamma over 4 pi V infinity r, that is the circulation is less than 4 pi V infinity r, then I'll have 2 points. I'll get two thetas which lie on the third and fourth quadrants. So I can draw the flow, corresponding flow with the cylinder to look something like this. The first diagram, that this is what actually we want. Yeah, so we can see that the new stagnation points have shifted themselves to 2 points in the third and fourth quadrants. So that is what this solution says. The next case we'll consider is the circulation or the strength of the vortex is equal to 4 pi v infinity r. So let's see what happens this case what happens is you get sine inverse of -1, so which is it's nothing but 270 degrees, 3 pi by 2. So you can guess how the flow field might look like. We'll get only one stagnation point because it is just one state value, we don't have a common solution. So this is where the stagnation point will be, and this is how the flow looks here. So we have a single stagnation point in this case. And similarly, we have the third case where the circulation becomes greater than 4 pi v infinity times r, and even now we can see that we have only one stagnation point, and that stagnation point is not on the surface of the cylinder. Yeah, it is outside the surface of the cylinder, it is in the flow. Let me try to sketch it. This is what it looks like, more or less. You get a full circular vortex here. Something that that represents this case. Yeah. And once we are done with this, we can now that we have got how the flow field looks like, and we have represented the flow field mathematically also, and we have calculated where the stagnation points, we have located the stagnation points. We can move on to finding. So we found that this thing generates lift intuitively, but we need to make it quantitatively. So we'll try to calculate what is a lift here. So for that, so we all know that lift is due to the pressure difference on the surface of the cylinder. So let's try to calculate the pressure coefficient, and from there we'll try to calculate the drag coefficient and the lift coefficient. So to calculate the velocity on the surface, we have to assume our r to be capital R, because that brings down the contour to the surface. So we have substituting that, we get v equals v theta, which is -2 times v infinity into sine theta minus gamma over 2 pi r. That's from this equation. So we have the velocity, and we know that from Bernoulli's equation for incompressible flow, we can derive the pressure coefficient Cp to be 1 minus v by v infinity whole square. The pressure coefficient is nothing but p minus p infinity by p infinity. We can just use Bernoulli's equation, p plus half rho v infinity v square is a constant. So if we use these two equations, we can get Cp to be 1 minus v by v over v infinity square, and if we substitute this v over this in this equation, you'll get a very long expression. It is 1 minus 4 sine square theta plus 2 times gamma sine theta over 4 pi, not sorry, it is over pi r v infinity plus gamma over 2 pi r v infinity whole square. So this is the expression for pressure coefficient. Yeah. Now we know that we'll try to calculate the drag first. And that is where we get something very paradoxical. So the drag is given by 1 by c, where c is any characteristic length, 1 by c times leading edge to the trailing edge. We integrate the difference in the pressure coefficients on the upper surface minus on the pressure coefficient on the lower surface from the leading edge to the trailing edge. That is the drag that we'll be calculating. So let's try to convert this to polar coordinates. We can assume y equals r sin theta just to make things easier, and dy equals r cos theta d theta, and we have cd equals half. Since we calculate the upper surface and lower surface individually, we can say the upper surface runs from 0 to pi and the lower surface runs from pi to 2 pi. That's in the clockwise direction. So to take it in the positive sense, we take it in the anti-clockwise direction. So we take it from pi to 0, cp upper surface cos theta d theta minus half integral pi to 2 pi cp lower surface cos theta d theta. Now we can see that the expression for cp that we have got here, the pressure coefficient, is independent of whether it's the lower surface or the upper surface. There is no parameter to set that, so we can say that this is nothing but minus half. If I change this from if I change the first integral from 0 to pi instead of pi to 0, I'll get minus half integral 0 to 2 pi. I just combine the two integrals, and taking cpl equals cpu equals cp, I can get cp cos theta d theta. So this is my drag coefficient. So if I substitute this cp into this equation, if I substitute this here, I'm not going to do the maths here because it's very long, so we can just go directly to the results. We'll get something very paradoxical. We'll get CD equals 0. That is what the analytic expression says, but in reality it is not the case. We can see it very intuitively, because a cylinder is just a foreign object that we are introducing in a flow, and it must create some drag. So this is a result that we have obtained analytically, and it's saying the drag coefficient is 0, which implies the drag force is also 0. Let's move on, try to calculate the lift coefficient now. So we assume it to be an inviscid flow. We assume an inviscid flow, which implies my CF is 0, the coefficient of friction, and I can calculate my lift coefficient in a similar way I calculated drag. I can write CL is nothing but 1 by c integral 0 to c cp lower surface minus 1 by c integral 0 to c cp upper surface dx. So similarly, I do the same transformation to polar coordinates. I write x equals r. This time it's r cos theta, and we have dx equals r minus r sin theta d theta, and I get the expression for the lift coefficient to be minus half integral 0 to 2 pi cp sin theta d theta. We assuming the upper surface and lower surface have the same cp, because there is no distinction from the cp equation, and doing some trigonometry, we substitute that expression into here, and we get cl to be equal to gamma over r v infinity. After solving a very big expression, you'll get a very simple result. And from here we can say we know that the lift per unit span, which is represented by L prime, is Q infinity S CL, where S is in characteristic length, and here Rs would be 2 times R. That is what we assume. And this is nothing but Q infinity is the dynamic pressure, which is given by half rho infinity V infinity square times S times CL, and our CL is nothing but gamma over RV infinity. And we assume our characteristic length to be 2r for a cylinder case, that's the diameter. So my lift is nothing but rho infinity V infinity times circulation. This is a very important result, historical result, that we have got to relate the circulation with the lift. So if we know what is the circulation around any object, this not only applies to a cylinder, this applies to any kind of object. So if we know the circulation around an object, we can directly calculate its lift by this very simple expression, and this is called the Kutta-Joukowski theorem. This is a very important result. Okay. So we have a few insights that we need to find here. So while calculating this, we observed that there was no restriction on what kind of circulation should be taken or what kind of gamma should be taken. For a given flow field condition, for example, for a given V infinity, if I place an object in a field which has a free-stream velocity of V infinity, and the gamma could be anything. We are now free to choose the gamma, and the lift could be anything. This is not practically possible. Like, you cannot have different situations occurring at the same time, right? So we need to have some control over the lift or some control over the circulation to achieve a proper condition, which is actually practically observed when you do an experiment. So that restriction is what is given by something called the Kutta condition. Alright, so let's see what is the Kutta condition now. So let's look at an image quickly. So if you can see this image, this describes three cases. There are three cases of flow over an airfoil. So the first case describes if there were no circulation around an airfoil. That's hypothetical, which cannot happen because circulation is what is creating the lift over an airfoil. So if there were no circulation, the stagnation points would have looked like this, and you can see there is a sudden turn at the trailing edge of the airfoil, and this accelerates the flow almost to an infinite extent, and that is not possible. That does not happen in reality also. And suppose I have very low circulation, the stagnation points are pushed down a little bit, and the flow becomes like that, and there is still a change in velocity, an increment in velocity near the trailing edge. And if I have very high circulation, the stagnation point gets pushed too much, and it comes like this. It crosses the trailing edge and comes below the airfoil, and this also does not occur in reality. And so there must be something intermediate, some kind of specific circulation which makes the flow leave the trailing edge smoothly, so that we do not violate anything and we still get the circulation and the lift. So that is what the Kutta condition says. So let me briefly state what is the Kutta condition. The Kutta condition is as follows. So the first point is, for a given airfoil at a given angle of attack, so the angle of attack must be constant. At a given angle of attack, you can say that the circulation around the airfoil must be such that the flow leaves the trailing edge smoothly. Leaves the trailing edge smoothly. This is the first point that we need to keep in mind. The second point is, in case the trailing edge is finite. The trailing edge is finite. Let me draw a figure just for understanding. For example, this is my trailing edge. this is the trailing edge of my airfoil, then this is how the velocities would look like. I'll have a velocity in this direction, I'll have a velocity in this direction near the surface or close to the surface of the airfoil, and suppose I assume this to be V2, this to be V1. This is my trailing edge. I need to have V1 equals V2 equals 0, so that only then we can have a smooth flow out of the trailing edge, or else we'll have two different velocities with different directions at the same point, and that is not possible in reality. So when V1 and V2 becomes 0, this point becomes a stagnation point because the velocity is 0. So if the trailing edge is finite, then the trailing edge is a stagnation point, must be a stagnation point. That is the condition that this circulation needs to satisfy. And the third is if this is the second case actually, trailing edge is a cusp trailing edge. So let me draw a figure quickly. So in case of a cusp trailing edge which looks like this, we have flow velocities like this which are almost parallel. We have V1 and V2, and we can have, because they are parallel and they are in the same direction, we must have V1 and V2 to be same, but they need not be 0. They can be non-zero, they should be non-zero. And that is the third condition that says that the trailing edge, the upper and let me write it, the upper and lower surfaces will have equal velocities at the trailing edge. These are not the exact statements, but this conveys the idea at the trailing edge. Yeah. So if we, for example, I want to write this in terms of a vortex sheet, I consider the trailing edge to be vortex sheet. For example, you have a long infinite wing, then I can write it to be the gamma of trailing edge. Gamma is the strength of the vortex sheet of the trailing edge must be V1 minus V2, which is 0, which must be 0. So I can say that gamma of which is 0 in both the cases. In case of a finite wing, both of these are 0, and in case of a cusp, both of these are equal. So either ways, the vortex strength at the trailing edge must be 0. This is just another form of stating theta condition. So from this we can obtain the actual, the specific circulation that is allowed, and it that which contributes to the lift at that particular angle of attack. So yeah, so we have reached the last section of our discussion. So that is Zukowski. That is the Zukowski transformation. This is an elegant method which can take a circle and make it an airfoil. For example, let's see how that's done. Consider I have my XY plane here. I'll make a copy of it. So what the Zukowski transformation does is that, suppose I have my XY plane here, and I call this the Z plane, and I have another plane which is my xi eta plane, which I call the zeta plane. So what it does is, suppose I have a circle in my Z plane which has its center slightly offset from the origin, it transforms this to an airfoil in a different plane through a mathematical construct. So this is what we call the Zukowski transformation. And this is an Zukowski transformation is a type of a mapping called a conformal mapping, which is a one-to-one mapping that can be used that is mostly used for converting geometrical shapes for different purposes. Like in our purpose, it's for ease of analysis, because it's much easier to analyze the flow over a cylinder than that of an airfoil. So by analysis we mean that for a given complicated flow, we need to reduce the velocity potentials, stream functions, etc. So it is easier for a easier to do for a cylinder compared to that of an airfoil. So this is just the pictorial representation. Let's see how the function looks like. So the function looks like this. Suppose I have any general point on the zeta plane given by xi plus I times neta. This is a complex plane, obviously, and the function is written as z plus b square by z, where b is any constant, and we'll see that this is the point which represents b, and there will be another b minus b which might lie inside the circle or it might lie outside the circle, depending on which we'll get different sorts of geometries in the zeta plane. So let's quickly perform a small analysis to get a better understanding. So let's for sake of simplicity, let's assume b equals 1. So I I get my zeta to be z plus 1 by z, and z is any point on the complex plane in the argand plane, and I can call it as x plus iy. So if I substitute this back into zeta equals z plus 1 by z, I get zeta equals x plus iy plus 1 by x plus iy. If I simplify this, I'll get x into x square plus y square plus 1 by x square plus y square plus I times, this is the imaginary part, I times y into x square plus y square minus 1 over x square plus y square. So which is equal to xi plus I times eta. So from this I can say that my xi, that is the transformed x coordinate in the zeta plane, is x times x square plus y square plus 1 divided by x square plus y square, and my transformed y coordinate is eta equals y times x square plus y square minus 1 over x square plus y square. So this is a general result for on solving this Zukowski transformation, and depending on what kind of path or what kind of function x and y follow, we'll get different kinds of geometries in the zeta plane. For example, let's take a very simple example here. Um, yeah, let's take an example of a circle with unit circle with. Let me quickly draw the circle. Um, Let me take the example of a unit circle with center at the origin. So this I can write as mod z equals root of x square plus y square, which is 1. And this is the equation of circle. Mod z equals 1 is the equation of circle with unit circle with center at the origin. This will give us x square plus y square equals 1. So if we substitute this back into our component equations of zeta and neta, we'll get xi and eta, we'll get um, xi to be x times 2, which is nothing but 2x, and eta to be 0, because it is 1 minus 1, x square plus y square minus 1, so it is a 0. So this represents nothing but it represents a flat plate in the zeta domain. Let me quickly draw it. It represents nothing but just a flat plate from minus 2 to 2. So we can see that flat plate is regarded in theory as a very thin representation of an airfoil. So we can see that it starts giving airfoil kind of geometries even when we have assumed it's a unit circle. So when we shift the center of the circle, when we change the radius of the circle, things start to change differently. Let us quickly look at a small clip to illustrate this transformation. So this is a small video taken from the AT&T archive. This video briefly animates this transformation which they have given as w equals z plus 1 by z, and in our case we have assumed w to be zeta. We can see how the points moves when the point moves like that on a z plane. Yeah, this is animated by the Bell Laboratories. There's some examples. The usual triangle becomes a very weird kind of shape in the zeta plane, and you can see this is an offsetted circle of the unit radius, and it creates an entwined shape on the zeta plane. If we take infinitesimal figures where we assume z to be the difference in z's to be very small, then we'll get almost similar figures in the zeta plane, but they are slightly distorted, like in the sense they are oriented in a different angle and they are scaled differently. You can see it is slightly larger and it is tilted. You can see the difference very clearly. Suppose I have an infinitesimal marker which moves like this. You can see how it moves on the zeta plane. These can be easily animated using, there are a lot of online animation tools like Wolfram Alpha can be used, or MATLAB can also be used. Um, yeah. So we can see that now from this video we would have got a very good intuitive idea of how the Zukowski transformation works. So let's come back to our lifting flow over a cylinder and try to make it an airfoil, because airfoil generates lift. So this is another picture of our lifting flow over a cylinder, and this is our airfoil. So we need to convert this lifting flow over a cylinder to that of an airfoil. So uh, so yeah, so we can start. So we'll assume that I'll just write my zeta again. It is z plus d square by z, and I'll define a new quantity which is called the complex potential, which is defined as the velocity potential plus I times my psi. We know that velocity potential and psi both are orthogonal quantities, because we have calculated that earlier, and we can define this thing called as the complex potential, which is denoted by F. Similar to phi and xi, complex potential can also be added when we add elementary flows. So if we take the derivative of the complex potential with respect to z, I'll get something called W of z, which we call as the complex velocity. Like similar to when we take the derivative of phi or psi, we get the radial velocity, or the tangential velocity. We'll get here something called the complex velocity. So we can write this as u minus iv. The negative is just a convention, just to make things simpler. And if you take, for example, I have my plane here. If I take the v velocity to be in this direction, that is the net velocity, root u square plus v square, and this will be my u and this will be my v. Suppose I consider this to be my v radial and this to be my v theta, and if I take some angles and if I try to resolve, I can prove that this is nothing but Vr minus I v theta times cos theta minus I sin theta, which by using Euler's form we can write as Vr minus I v theta times e power minus I theta. So this is my def by dg, or also the complex velocity. And suppose I need to calculate the complex velocity in the zeta plane. I can write it as W of zeta equals df by d zeta, which I can write as df by dz times dz by d zeta. So this is nothing but w of z times, I'm trying to relate the complex velocities in both the planes, so times dz by d zeta. Sorry. Yeah. So we can see that I can write my w of zeta over w of z to be dz by d zeta. Sorry. Or I can write the reciprocal, which is w of z by w of zeta to be um, d zeta over d. I want to write this because I know zeta as a function of z, because we know that zeta equals z plus b square by z. So I can write d zeta over dz to be 1 minus b square by z square, right? Let me quickly bring the figure back here. Yeah, let's have the figure here. So from here we can say that because we know what is d zeta by dz now, we can write w of z by w of zeta is nothing but 1 minus b square by z square. So I can write my w of zeta, which is the complex velocity in the transform plane, that is the complex velocity in the plane of the airfoil, is 1 minus I'm making yeah, it is w of z by 1 minus b square by z square. So from the figure here we can observe that um, there is one point, the stagnation point for the cylinder which is at a distance plus b here, and minus b would be somewhere here inside the circle, inside the cylinder. You can see that and we need to show that this point m, which is the stagnation point for the cylinder, is same as the stagnation point or the trailing edge of the airfoil. So let's see how that is done. So for example, if I calculate what is the value of zeta at b, it will be nothing but b plus b, which is nothing but 2b. So that means the point m here in the point m here in the cylinder corresponds to nothing but the trailing edge of the airfoil, which is at a distance 2b from the origin, as described. We can verify this geometrically also. So now we need to prove that this point m is a stagnation point, so that the Kutta condition is satisfied and the flow leaves the trailing edge of the airfoil smoothly. We can to do that we have to set our z equals b, and let's see what happens to our complex velocity in the zeta plane. So it is w of b divided by 1 minus b square by b square. So this thing, the denominator is tending to 0, which means the entire thing is tending to infinity. So we can see that um, in case w of b is a non-zero quantity, you can see that at 2b in the airfoil, the complex velocity, which is the velocity, is tending to infinity. So that is not possible practically. So that is what Kutta condition says. So to make sure that this thing does not go to infinity, we need to have w of b equals 0. So that means the only situation which is possible is w of b equals 0. That means the point m, which is on the circle, should be a stagnation point because the velocity is 0. And that is how the Kutta condition is also described um, through the complex analysis that we have just done, and through Zukowski transformation. Alright, so we have come to the end of the video, but before I leave, I'd like to give you a quick demonstration of the lifting flow over a cylinder, which is quite non-intuitive. We might not have seen that very commonly in our real lives. situations. So this is a video that I've taken from YouTube by Mr. Bruce Yaney. He has his YouTube channel called Homemade Science. Let's quickly go through the video. This is a small experiment that all of us can perform in our homes. So all we need is a paper cup, some tape, and some rubber bands. So we take two paper cups or two cups and we put them bottom to bottom, and we tape them like this around their circumference. Make sure you tape them tightly so that they don't come up when we perform the experiment. We tape them like this. This is a paper cup. We have a plastic cup, and we have a foam cup. So you can try experiment with different kinds of cups. And this is rubber bands. We knot the rubber bands in a similar fashion to make them longer. We use them that way. Make sure you follow the knots properly, and we have different kinds of rubber bands, thinner ones, thicker ones, depending upon the size of the cup that we're using. Bigger cups require larger rubber bands. So this is the experiment. So just wrap around the rubber band, stretching it around the paper cup, and then you have to just release it in this fashion. You can observe that the cup moves upwards then downwards. So suddenly when you give a rotation to the cup, it starts generating lift. That is what we got theoretically also, and we have observed that experimentally. Let me show. Okay, this is a very big cup that he is trying to launch. You can see it also generates lift. There is another part. This is where he fixes an LED light inside the cup so to trace the motion of the cup. When you take a time-lapse picture, so this is what you can see, the cup goes upwards and downwards. The lift is being generated. Yeah, this is also called the Magnus effect, which is prominent in some bowlers in cricket. So this is just another variation of the experiment. We try to launch the cup sideways and see what happens. Top view. Yeah. So when we try to launch the cup sideways, we can clearly see that the cup gets a push towards the direction in which it was supposed to get a lift when it was launched vertically. So we can there's just another variation of the same experiment demonstrating that the principle still holds. And so that's all for this video, and thank you everyone for listening.